How's it going? Welcome. So chat, how you doing? How you doing this Independence Eve? For me, it's little less than 2.5 hours from Independence Day, which is when George Washington comes and gives everyone a little blessing of freedom. Maybe leave some ammo. Leave some ammo by your front door. Just outside your front door, of course. No quartering troops. All right, but hello, welcome Tristan. Welcome Tristan on both Twitch and Kick. Hello. Spooky Actual. Hello. Not the Batfa. Welcome. First, clearly. Spooky. My last IRL would get me bullied. A Silencer Co. Octane 2, 45. I mean, 45 suppressors are... meh. The meme of friends don't let friends buy a Silencer show? Silencer Co. Friends don't let friends buy Silencer Central. Silencer Central's the bad company. I do sometimes get them confused. Unless there's something about Silencer Co. that I don't know. Leave some milk and cookies for Raytheon this Independence Day. Oh, dang it. Man. I was gonna buy the Raytheon gummy snacks for Independence Day and I forgot. Dang it. Oh well. Silencer Co. pretty cool. Yeah, from what I know, Silencer Co. is pretty cool. Silencer Central is the cowards. Silencer Central called it. So I don't think Silencer Central called it. The reason I don't think they called it is because Silencer Central was working for only reducing the tax on only suppressors. Let's not forget where we came from. It was originally, if Silencer Central and Kustov were going to have their way, it was originally going to be only tax reduction, only suppressors. And now we have tax reduction on suppressors and short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and AOWs. Also, Silencer Central wasn't even gonna fight to have them removed from the NFA. The fact that the fight happened at all wouldn't have been an occurrence. Nightwolf just got here. We talking taxes. That is going to be a hot topic here. So we may as well talk about that first. I have a few things to talk about today. Wow, a streamer with a real plan? It's crazy. So yeah, first point for today. The House and Senate have passed the big betrayal bill that still registers the $0 tax on certain firearms. And theoretically, Trump will be signing that into law tomorrow. there's probably going to be a whole big fanfare built around it because Trump is a showman. And people will be very upset. Every season is tax season if you're constantly filing Form 4s. Form 4s and Form 1s. I like Form 4s better because they're easier. And then you can use like the silencer shop kiosks. Yeah, so for those who have been living under a rock for the past day and are somehow here, there are no removal of NFA items from the NFA. There is, however, the changing of the tax from 200 to 0 for suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and AOWs. But they're still on the NFA. We also lost the provision about, I always forget the verbiage of it, like this, the sporting purposes provision and getting approved. The provision that makes it so that they can just arbitrarily say things like the Striker 12 are now destructive devices. Isn't it great? There will soon be a law in the books that gives you a decade in prison for not paying a $0 tax. Don't forget the $250,000 fine for not paying your $0 tax. Don't forget that part. It is very ridiculous. Entirely stupid. And Derek, I say we shut down the position of parliamentarian. So I talked about this yesterday briefly. My thoughts on the parliamentarian are a bit more nuanced. And I know a nuanced opinion in this day and age is crazy. But my opinion on the parliamentarian is it wasn't the parliamentarian's fault. The parliamentarian's opinion on that specific issue could have easily been overturned. And you can argue about whether or not the parliamentarian was the issue, but there were many chances for the representatives to not give into that opinion. So whether or not the parliamentarian is an issue can be debated. But was the parliamentarian the cause of this? No. The cause was that representatives were too cowardly to actually overrule it. Spooky. Gotta do a Form 1 soon. I'm looking forward to it, TBH. Not looking forward to it. That makes more sense. You could just wait till January. Gotta wait till January for your discount tax stamp. Because the provision in the bill is 90 days. My understanding is that the changes, while it does say 90 days, my understanding is the changes will actually start at the beginning of the next quarter that comes more than 90 days afterwards, which would be January. So you gotta wait freaking forever. 6 months for your discounted tax stamp. It's dumb. X count for Congress. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Congress is an absolute hellhole. And no, that sounds awful. Spooky. For a second, I'd hope that one day I'd see the 86 band pulled back. Not a lot of hope. Just a little twinkle. I'm gonna be honest. The fact that the NFA... I got a hair. There's a hair. Go away. The fact that the NFA got poked at all is an achievement. Like, if you had asked me 6 months ago if there was any chance that anything in the NFA would be changed in the foreseeable future, I would have said no. And now, it's not a big change. It's a very small change. But it opens the door to a lot of things. Why not? You're already cold-blooded. Being a lizard can't be too different. The problem is that there's things that happen in my brain called logic and empathy and critical thinking. None of those are traits that are particularly popular for congressional representatives. What's the point of the NFA if the tax stamps are 0? Good question, honorable chatter. we actually have an answer to that. We have an answer to that right here. GOA, the one big beautiful lawsuit. Segue, paid chatter. Oh, hold on, you guys can't hear it.
Hey everyone, this is Eric Pratt, Senior Vice President for Gun Owners of America, and I am proud to announce that GOA will be filing a lawsuit to gut the National Firearms Act of 1934. We're doing this now that Congress has reduced the tax on suppressors and short-barreled firearms from $200 down to 0. More on that in a moment. With Trump's big, beautiful bill set to become law, I wanted to take a moment to update you on what gun owners achieved or didn't achieve in the budget reconciliation process and tell you about our imminent fight to gut the NFA in federal court.
Are we going to have a thoughtful and nuanced opinion in these times? We'll see. We'll see.
But first, a quick message to Republican legislators on Capitol Hill.
You absolute cowards.
You just burnt a lot of goodwill with gun owners. You let an unelected bureaucrat in the Senate tell you that the only excise tax in history that cannot be repealed under the Byrd Rule is the National Firearms Act of 1934. Now GOA will have to finish the job in court at great expense, and we're going to remember this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Now, to all our
If
gun
Congress won't do
activists
it,
and
at least
GOA
someone will do
members,
it.
thank you from the bottom of my heart. You publicly fought alongside of us, tooth and nail, for the last 2 months, and we are so grateful. Between our work behind the scenes since the November 2020.
Oh, I was going to before stream, but I forgot to count how many calls I made. Hold on, I can do it right now. You know what? We can do it right now. How many calls did I make for this thing? I don't make a lot of phone calls, so it should be easy to count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16. Oh, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 20. Oh, wait, I missed. Yeah, 22. 22 phone calls I made to representatives in Congress over these issues over the last like month and a half, 2 months. Could that have been a bigger number? Probably. If you had ever asked me if I was going to make 22 calls to Congress in 2 months, I would have been like, no. No, there's no chance. But here we are.
24 election, and your melting of the phone lines and email servers on Capitol Hill, we came closer to gutting the NFA than anyone has since that infringement was passed 91 years ago. That's a historic achievement, and we're honored to have fought with you in the trenches, and we promise to continue the fight. This strategy...
Historic achievement and a coward's compromise win. That's what we got.
Strategy is something that we actually spent the last year working on with our allies in Congress, and so we want to make sure that our members have a complete understanding of the situation, including our two-pronged strategy in the Senate. Not only that, but there's a lot of misinformation floating around that we have to correct. So here's what happened. Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill was passed through a process known as budget reconciliation. That means that the bill itself had a lower voting threshold because it could pass the filibuster and clear the Senate with a simple majority of 51 votes. Bottom line, this meant that Republicans with a majority in both chambers of Congress,
the easiest bill to pass,
with control of the White House, didn't need to negotiate with Democrats to pass the bill as they would have if there was a 60-vote threshold in the Senate. But there's a catch. A reconciliation bill can only make budgetary changes like altering the tax code. It can't change criminal code or be primarily policy related. So
it's too bad the
Republicans
NFA was passed as a tax.
The idea of a budget reconciliation just after the November 2024 election win, we had an idea. The NFA is a tax, so why not use the budget reconciliation process to repeal the NFA tax and by extension remove the registration requirements that come with the NFA tax? As I mentioned earlier, this kicked off a process where GOA's
the NFA
federal
is
affairs team
and has always been a tax.
Spent countless
the Supreme
hours
Court approved that
researching
multiple
this
times.
process and making sure that we could help House and Senate offices with the correct language to get this passed and get through the very tricky reconciliation process. Amaland wrote about this recently, about how GOA pioneered this fight and came up with this strategy to gut the NFA while bypassing the filibuster. Most of the members of Congress, committee staff, even other gun groups wanted to stop short from the beginning and fought GOA to only reduce the NFA tax to $5 and only for suppressors at that. Well, our lobbyists were asked time and time again to stop pushing the Short Act, but GOA led the fight, developed the strategy, and moved the Overton window to include short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and AOWs in addition to suppressors. We also shifted the conversation to fully repealing the NFA tax, not just reducing it to $5 or $0.
So I think that is an overlooked and understated part of what happened. Is now the conversation. The conversation now is seriously on removing these things from the NFA. I guess it's sad and disappointing that these things are currently and still on the NFA, and this weird $0 tax registration is still a thing. But there's a lot of people talking, and there's a lot of pressure for actually removing things from the NFA.
Well, GOA never compromised in this, and we won several grassroots battles along the way. We defeated the Ways and Means Committee's compromise in the House, plus we convinced House leadership and the Senate Finance Committee to take up GOA's language in their respective chambers. That's what we were working hard for from the outside. On the inside, got to give a big thank you to Representative Andrew Clyde and Senator Steve Daines for helping us get the full repeal for suppressors and short-barreled firearms.
I've not heard Daines before. Obviously, we've heard of Clyde. Clyde, the lad, the absolute legend. This is the first time I've heard Daines, though. I mean, if GOA is praising Daines, then I don't know what he did, but I'm sure it was wonderful.
However, there was still one big battle, one big hurdle, and in the federal code, it's known affectionately as the Byrd Rule. The Byrd Rule determines what makes it into a reconciliation bill, and it's also administered by...
Oh, Daines was the one who put the Short Act in the Senate. The full... Okay. Yeah, that man deserves a firm handshake. What a absolute legend. You are right. The Short Act was added in the Senate. That's very good.
By an unelected bureaucrat known as the Senate parliamentarian, who isn't even a senator. Basically, if the parliamentarian, or parl for short, decides that our language isn't primarily tax related, and she thinks it's primarily a policy, then anti-gun Democrats can have it easily removed. And to override her ruling, it requires that the House muster 60 votes to add the language back in. To be clear, Democrats are united in their opposition, meaning any language that does not pass the Byrd Rule would have to be revised to comply, or conversely.
I think that's one of the Republicans' biggest weaknesses. The Democrats are pretty unified. The Republicans absolutely are not. That's why the Democrats have been getting so much done. Is because while the Republicans are off busy infighting, the Democrats unify behind things. Even if I think the things that they unify behind are absolutely just horrible, miserable pieces of nonsense sometimes. They're unified, and so it happens.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune could fire the parliamentarian so that we can get a new one who is not a Democrat partisan hack. And so that's where we stand today. After working for months to remove the taxation and registration requirements from the NFA, the Senate parl struck down our language, claiming that it was policy.
Deregulation of gun silencers and easily concealable guns. All right, chat. Which one of these is more easy to conceal? This large competition handgun, or this Stuck. Or this, not SBR'd yet, but will eventually be SBR'd. Same size as an SBR, subgun. Which of these is easier to conceal? Maybe the smaller one? But this larger one, too easy to conceal, requires extra regulation. Unbelievable. Does it take Glock mags? No, because I'm not a psychopath.
Instead of being tax-related. Well, we eminently
Oh, hold on. You guys can't see. I forgot to change the scene back. Whoa.
NFA. The Senate Parles struck down our language, claiming that it was policy instead of being tax-related. Well, we eminently disagree with their ruling. In fact, the NFA is the first excise tax in history to be ruled non-compliant with the Byrd Rule.
That's insane. That's wild. That's one of those statements that, like, it is so out there, it's hard to believe, but it is actually true. For instance, if a bill called the Saving Dying Puppies from Cancer Bill, they would have 5 sentences about helping puppies and several papers about sending more money to Israel and tax cuts for military defense. That's just called an omnibus bill, and that happens all the time. That's why those guns are on the NFA. It's not totally insane verbiage to use considering the source. It is silly though. Yeah, so I've said this before, but for those who don't know, short-barreled shotguns, short-barreled rifles, and AOWs are in the NFA because the NFA originally was designed to have handguns, to regulate handguns and have the tax on handguns. And they added short-barreled rifles, shotguns, and AOWs as a loophole closure, so you couldn't just have a really short rifle that served the same use case as a pistol, even though it would be larger and bulkier and more cumbersome. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And then they did way back in 1934, and they removed the handgun section, which is why you can own handguns. That's why I can own all these handguns without having to pay NFA fees and wait for the registration and all that stuff. But they left in the loophole closure. So now you can have long guns, you can have short guns, but this medium length of gun, for some reason, is just it's too scary. It's off the table. How dare you? The NFA is dumb, and I hate it, and it's always been dumb.
Not exactly the way we wanted to make history, but what do you expect from a Democrat appointee? Yeah, she was appointed 23 years ago by Democrat Senator Harry Reid. Remember him? Anyway,
No.
her partisan ruling flies in the face of court rulings like the Sonzinski versus U.S. case from 1937, where the entire decision hinged on the fact that SCOTUS ruled the NFA is in fact a tax.
Yeah, the NFA is
Just goes to show
an
that
exercise in
when it comes to
Congress's
guns,
ability to
politicians
tax.
and bureaucrats will throw all the rules out the window. Needless to say, we're furious with the Senate parliamentarian, and the first thing I did was issue a statement from GOA calling for the firing or overruling of the Senate parliamentarian, and we're still calling for her to be fired today. But Leader Thune didn't immediately fire her, and under the Parles ruling, the Senate was only allowed to include the $0 tax stamp for suppressors SBRs, SBSs, and AOWs while retaining all the gun control.
Congratulations, you played yourselves. You made something unconstitutional even more unconstitutional.
Objectively speaking, this was the maximum bite we were allowed to take under the Parles decision under the Senate rules, but it's not the win that we and our members wanted, and it's also still a far cry from what GOA spent the last year fighting to accomplish. And that's exactly what GOA said in a joint statement with several other gun organizations. Remember, the NFA is 91 years old, and this is the closest any of the language has ever come to being repealed. If GOA had just quit the fight with the...
That is true. That's true. If you had asked me 6 months ago, if you had asked me 3 months ago, if there was any chance at all of things being removed from the NFA, any chance, I would have been like, no. No, you're crazy. And are you okay? Did you get enough sleep last night? It's like 3 months ago. 3 months ago, it was never a possibility. So the achievement of making it a possibility, incredible. It's huge.
Parle then and there, gun owners might not have ever gotten another chance like this for another 100 years. Our consolation prize is that we've increased access to suppressors and short-barreled firearms for those who cannot afford.
No, not the short 308 HK. HK 51 spotted.
A $200 tax stamp, and that we set ourselves up for a legal challenge against the NFA. We understand that our recent joint statement made some folks mad, but we knew with that change, we had a path forward via litigation. You know, at the time, that wasn't something that we could publicly say because sometimes our strategy works
working
best
on stuff.
if it isn't plastered on
Working on
social
stuff in
media
secret
for Democrats, or in this case, the parliamentarian, to hear. If we had talked about...
If they had talked about this, I may be about to say what he's going to say. If they had talked about this, there would have been a huge push to not decrease the tax to zero. Because, and there were some people, I don't remember their names, but there were some utterances of just reducing the tax to $1. Because I think I never heard any reasoning behind just reducing it to $1. But I would wager it's because someone figured out what was going on here. Because a $0 tax registration, the threat of going to jail, and a $250,000 fine for not paying a $0 tax is unconstitutionally ridiculous.
About a forthcoming lawsuit, the Parle could have used that to rule against us once again and said we were trying to change the underlying policy rather than just trying to reduce the tax. She could have removed it then with a snap of her fingers. So now that the $0 NFA tax stamp is in the bill and was protected by the Byrd rule, it has become law. While it's a small step forward,
Trump still does have to sign that tomorrow.
GOA fully fought for. We didn't give up, and we continued fighting to overrule and fire the parliamentarians. Still, as we feared, our calls to do this fell on deaf ears in the Senate and later in the House. And as far as I've seen, only Senator Marshall, our Short Act sponsor, and Senators Tuberville and Paul wanted to fire the parliamentarian. So in the end, the House and the Senate only passed the bare minimum version, which removes the taxes on short-barreled firearms and suppressors,
spineless
but unfortunately keeps the registration requirements. We know that the tax is the least of the problems with the NFA. The registry must be dismantled along with taxation. Dealing with one without the other is only a half measure. And while I know that merely getting the $0 tax isn't ultimately what we wanted, there is a silver lining. More suppressors will be sold, and we'll have a better argument to challenge the NFA in court. As I mentioned earlier, GOA...
And instead of taking strides and leaps and bounds towards ending unconstitutional gun regulation, we crawled forward just a little bit. Which, considering the last 100 years, where people have been like just sprinting backwards, crawling forward just a little bit, it sucks because it should have been sprinting forward, taking a huge leap forward. But it is still huge.
has already announced that we are going to file a lawsuit to...
Who we got? GOA. This is one of the silencer companies. I don't know which one. Please, silencer companies, have better branding. You're not recognizable enough from the other ones. Gun Owners Foundation, PSA, FRAC, B&T. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money pushing this. There's a lot of money behind this lawsuit.
Remove suppressors and short-barreled firearms from the National Firearms Act of 1934. And we'll be joined by other groups, so just follow us on X and stay tuned for more details about this, for when and where it happens. Now, having said all this, I hope that one thing is standing out to you loud and clear. GOA is still fighting to fully repeal the NFA excise tax on silencers and short-barreled firearms, and to eliminate federal gun registration. We're not giving up on the fight. Just look at our website and view our legislative alerts. To the last day, we continued to fight for the full repeal of suppressors and short-barreled firearms from the NFA through Congress.
They did. I saw it.
We encouraged House reps and the White House to support the GOA-backed Clyde Amendment, which would have defanged the NFA, repealing the taxes and registration for all the items that I just mentioned.
So I think it would have been absolutely massive if the Clyde Amendment had gotten back in the bill. And I was kind of huffing the hopium for that one. But in reality, there was so much pressure to get the bill through so that Trump could have his big showmanship signing of the bill on the 4th that there was no chance of it happening. There was too much political bootlicking happening for that to be a possibility. A real possibility, unfortunately. I do think, I'm going to be honest, I think that if there wasn't so much pressure to get this thing done by the 4th, it would have been a real possibility. But with the deadline of the 4th, there's no way.
And we tried to help the House amend the bill and send it back to the Senate to be voted on again, so that then the Senate would be forced to fire or overrule the parle. All to say, we have never settled for the current language, and we're certainly not going to stop doing everything in our power to fully remove suppressors and short-barreled firearms from the NFA. Unfortunately, because of the complexity of this issue, grifters and scam artists have used this opportunity to enrich themselves off of misinformation and deception. Yes, while GOA was fighting a two-pronged strategy, our detractors were attacking us for not fighting. But they were the ones who weren't lifting a finger for gun owners. I mean, we couldn't make this up if we tried. For example, one of the most ludicrous attacks was an accusation that GOA cut a deal with leader Thune, and that we waited.
Who said it? Who said it? Give me names. Drop the names. Drop the Google Docie. Where is it?
The white flag and agreed not to fight for NFA repeal. Again, if you look at our website, you'll see that's a lie. In fact, there's one group out there that is settling for the $0 tax and which endorsed the Senate version of H.R. 1 with only the tax. And guess what?
NRA.
It wasn't GOA. Maybe our detractors have us confused with somebody else. Another misinformed accusation was that GOA...
There were a few who backed and endorsed the Senate version.
Endorsed Senator Thune, but that's completely false too. We never have. You know, it's odd. They claim that GOA isn't in the trenches fighting for our rights, but GOA is the only group to file lawsuits against all 3 of the Biden-era ATF rules and 2 lawsuits against the zero tolerance policy. Last year, we also helped secure a historic funding cut to ATF's budget, canceling a whole new class of agents and forced Biden to end
the giant ATF budget and personnel cuts. Going to be very interesting if this $0 tax doesn't immediately crumble in record time. Because I'm going to be clogging the system quite a bit. And I know a lot of other people will be as well.
a 3-decade-old gun ban program for veterans. I could go on, but like I said earlier, to this day, we continue to fight for a full repeal of suppressors and short-barreled firearms, and we have never wavered from that path. I can tell you this, at Gun Owners of America, it is our honor to represent gun owners across the country with integrity. We work with diverse groups with whom we don't agree 100% on every issue, but the lies and dishonest tactics by scam artists must be called out for what they are. It has been our policy not to get involved in feuds with other gun rights organizations. We pride ourselves on working with like-minded groups. When there's an opportunity to...
In order for all of these lawsuits from all these different companies to go through, for it to actually go through as fast as possible, which it will need to, they're going to need to unify a little bit. Because individually, all these different pro-gun organizations have been doing quite a lot. They've been doing a lot in the recent years. But if they could unify behind something, imagine what they could do.
To fight together, to fight for the defense and restoration of the Second Amendment, we will always work together. But when lies and dishonest communications cause confusion and harm to the Second Amendment community, well, we want the truth and facts to speak for themselves. You have my promise that GOA is committed to honesty, integrity, and transparency. We will never stop fighting in the state capitals and in Washington, D.C. to protect and defend the Second Amendment. And we stand ready to work with any group who shares our goals in any given situation. Remember, no matter what, there's actually a silver lining to this situation. Just around 3 years ago, 65 senators voted to pass the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Cornyn. Cornyn was one of those. Remember, any residents of Texas, Cornyn has got a long history of not being pro-gun. Do what you will with that information, but know it.
Now we're talking about dismantling one of the foundational pillars of gun control in this country, the National Firearms Act. A year ago, did you even think this could be possible? Well, we did at GOA, and that's why we crafted the strategy to lead this fight. GOA will continue to battle on behalf of our members. We'll continue to be the only no compromise group in Washington, D.C., and we're not giving up on abolishing all gun control nationwide. Today, we're going to continue to fight to repeal the NFA in court by challenging this new $0 tax stamp. And in the meantime,
legally
our team
fight
on the Hill will keep looking for other ways to fully repeal the NFA through Congress.